So starting off with an update on what core has been doing lately. So in general, core deals with about one report to the conduct team per month, sometimes more. Since previous core, where there was a separate conduct team, but it ran out of people that wanted to do that job, and so it fell down to core to continue to deal with that fun issue. But we continue to deal with that and try to keep us all together as one big happy family. The other thing that core has been working on is the technical roadmap, trying to map out where the project needs to go forward to make sure that we're not missing opportunities. Hiroki, did you want to talk about that a bit?
No, totally.
Yeah. The other big thing that core has been working on that we'll have other slides on shortly is drafting an AI policy, working with core and with the various manager teams like source manager, import manager, and doc manager to come up with a policy about AI and maintain the purity of the license in FreeBSD and all the complications that come around that. This core team has also spent a lot more effort on aligning with the foundation, so providing feedback to the foundation on improving transparency and so on, and you'll see more of that in Ed's talk tomorrow. But in general, working with that's part of where the technical roadmap thing is coming from, to also align with future funding directives and so on, making sure that the project and the foundation are pushing in the same direction and skating to where the puck is going to be. And obviously working on making sure that our plan that we, as a collective group of developers, had for 15.0 actually comes to fruition. Most of that is just cheerleading that core does, but reminding people and talking to people to make sure that all the pieces are going to come together to have a really nice package base and hopefully have the package CDN working by then so that we have faster package downloads as well for both package base and the regular third-party ports packages. We've also been working on how to reinvigorate the doceng team. Over time, the kind of goal there has shifted a lot. Part of the reason why it was called doceng back in the day rather than doc manager was a lot of the work went into maintaining the docbook XML framework. That's now overcome by events, as the work from previous teams has resulted in we now have the ASCII doc-based docs, and we don't spend the majority of our time dealing with XML syntax rather than actually writing documentation. And so as the role of that team is evolving, we're looking at how to reinvigorate that and have a charter that's closer to what Source Manager does rather than what Doc Manager or doceng used to do. And also looking at what the next evolution of the wiki will look like. We're on end-of-life software, but both previous attempts to convert the wiki into something else haven't gained any traction. Of course, one of those was to move it into the Fabricator wiki thing, and it turns out that was a dead end too. So choosing a technology that's actually going to continue to work into the future, although that requires some knowing the future, which is difficult. But working through that, and then also looking at supporting the foundation with project reviews. So when the foundation is deciding which products to fund, having more interaction with the core team and the project so that we have more input on which project should get the priority. And lastly, we want to look at revising the bylaws for core itself, mostly in hopes of having smoother transitions in the future. Currently, the way the core team works is, every 2 years we have an election and replace all 9 people, and that means that oftentimes there's very little carryover on, this list of what we've been working on. And so we're looking at proposals such as replacing 3 of the people on core every year instead of all of them every 2 years or something to that effect. So there's a more gradual transition. That way we see more carry through and more continuity across the core teams while still making sure we're getting fresh people in on an even more regular basis.
Do you want questions now or at the end?
I think as we go makes sense. So I'll repeat the question. Sorry, you asked the question now.
I understand that.
Okay.
I'm trying to figure out the question
Okay.
to ask about the bylaw review, because I did a ton of work on that and haven't heard anything. So let's go with, who should I talk to give my experience in looking at that? And how do you plan on overcoming the near impossibility of amending our bylaws?
So the question is, Warner, having spent time on this before, wants to know who he should commiserate with, and also how we...
I want to know who to work with.
Okay.
I put a lot of time in on it,
And I
I
wanna-
plan on putting more time in it on in the future.
Okay.
So,
Okay,
sorry if I was
no, that's...
polite and lost my true meaning.
So Warner's point is that he wants to continue carrying this forward and wants to know who he should work with. And lastly, how the core team plans to overcome the near impossibility of adjusting the bylaws. Part of that might be a slight interpretation change, where it would be 2/3 of the people who vote rather than 2/3 of the people who could vote, in order to actually overcome the fact that our voter turnout is barely 2/3 most of the time. So requiring a 2/3 people to vote yes on it is impractical. But yeah, I think we have a little bit more about that later, and definitely would like to continue the discussion. I think it's mostly myself and Dave Kottlehuber who are working on that.
Okay, yeah, I very much want to be involved in that because I've got opinions.
Yes. And I very much want to hear this. Any other questions before we move to the next slide? No? Okay. So on the technical roadmap, the main goal of that is to basically be the primary mechanism for feeding project-like priorities into the foundation. So we want input from the community and especially the developers on how we should classify and organize and rank the projects that we want to push to the foundation to actually make their priorities and get funded and get developed and get committed. And so to do that, we kind of need a roadmap of where do we want the FreeBSD project to be 5 years from now. And once we have that, then it becomes possible for the foundation to build a budget that involves getting to there. But when we often are coming up with these things on the fly as we go, it's much more difficult for anyone to kind of plan. And, it's very difficult to budget around projects that we don't know are going to happen until they need to happen. So having a technical roadmap where we can plan things out for the next couple of years will be a big advantage there. And we want to make sure that that's coming from all of the teams within the project, not necessarily just core, but having source manager have their input on what projects they need, but also port manager and making sure we have the infrastructure there to continue to maintain all those third-party packages. Getting DocInch to have what they need, including whatever support for translations and other things that are going to help grow the community. Continuing to support cluster admin, making sure we have the hardware and so on to keep building all those packages and hosting the repos and defending our cgit instance from the AI scrapers and all of those various bits. And as well, release engineering and so on to make sure that we continue to have the reliable releases that we want to have to keep projecting, new FreeBSD versions on the much appreciated new kind of consistent schedule of releases that I know a lot of consumers of FreeBSD have taken advantage of. And so some of those could be just, hardware support, obviously continuing to push and maintain on Wi-Fi. And recently there's the work on IOMMU and having support for really high CPU core counts. But there's possible, other areas, including just massive amounts of memory in a system and so on, that we'd like to continue pushing. And basically focusing on, planning out 2026 at this point. And so if you have projects you'd like to see happen there, we'd like to have that input as quickly as possible so that we can develop that into a roadmap and a plan. Does anybody have questions or suggestions for technical roadmap? All right. Now we get to the fun one.
Yeah.
So, we've been looking at what other projects are doing, including the Apache project and NetBSD and so on, and trying to decide how to communicate the policy around AI. In particular, a lot of the value of the FreeBSD project comes from the fact that you have all the components are clearly licensed under the BSD license or something relatively compatible to that. If we allow kind of unfettered AI submissions, that could taint that very easily. Oftentimes, the output of AI is not directly copyrightable for one of many different reasons, and can also end up including things that are licensed some other way without an indication of that. And that becomes a very large problem. Some of the other policies that exist out there, including the ones from like the Linux Foundation, have really strange wording about, you have to check the terms of service of the AI you're using and see if it allows you to license the things and so on. It's like, none of them actually provide certainty around that. So the policy is that you need to do something impossible, which really isn't a good way to do it. So mostly what we're looking at this point is that, save for very minor things that fall under the de minimis rule, we don't think that AI-generated code should be submitted at all. In particular, as part of committing things to FreeBSD, there's the agreement that you actually have the right to license. Did my mic go? Okay. To license the content that you're submitting under the license that it is, in most cases, the BSD clause license. And if you don't actually have the ability to attest that this content is licensed that way, then you shouldn't be committing it to FreeBSD. Do you want to talk more about that?
Yeah, there is lots of nuance here, because as example, as a non-native English speaker, what if when I'm committing stuff in Git, it will be written for a long period of time? I don't want to showing to the world all my poor English. So can I use AI to just do wording, to fix my spelling, grammar, wording error? What about the same use in comment? On what if people are using AI tool just as a command complete, just to accelerate the typing? Not to generate algorithm, but just to fix the typing or stuff like that. So there is kind of nuance here on how to draw a line of no AI at all. On what about spelling check? And so this is where all the policy became very complex on how to be able to write clear rules about this kind of blurry usage. So this is why the AI policy perhaps needs a little bit of nuance, like a big no. So yeah, this is why it's a very complex problem, how to be able to write the rules about that. So,
yeah, and I think Hiroki can talk a little bit more about this in a second, but it's even there drawing the fine line between using AI to improve the wording of your commit message versus when you get into things like translation, where that content actually needs to be copyrightable and the AI-generated translation is not. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more? Just the problems with AI for translation?
So translation project in a free or open source project have a long discussion about the machine-generated translation can be accepted in the project or not. And the general answer was varied depending on the project, but due to a lack of manpower of the translation, some projects actually accepting the generated results intact, but it causes the problem of the false authorship, and it can endanger the consistency of the license of the project. So we didn't have a clear consensus, but if we accept the machine-generated results without any deep consideration, we can lost the consistency of the license. So that is a point we have to take care of, and we have a discussion, and we should have a consensus on that So we are now discussing with Gmail community right now.
Yeah, and a big part of that is being able to provide very consistent kind of rules for people so that they're easy to follow, instead of having problems of, each committer having to try to lawyer out what is a copyrightable block of text versus not. At what point does a commit message become long enough that it's not de minimis versus, doing a translation where, we're generating a whole document and that needs to be copyrightable, so can't be AI. And so trying to make it as straightforward as possible for people to know what should and shouldn't be allowed, while still maintaining the nuance of not, hampering people from getting the advantages of accelerating their work, but without endangering the licensability of the generated code or documentation. Questions? Christos?
Sorry, I don't mean to sound like closed-minded, but I think if we start allowing small things, like, okay, now you can do some translation, I think in 5 years, 10 years, it might be, okay, now maybe you can write some code as well. I think if we're not absolute about no AI usage, then it opens the door for more and more less quality code. And I think projects survive 40 years, 50 years without AI, so I think it's probably not worth the complexity we'll introduce.
Yeah, so Chris's point was it's a slippery slope. If we allow some AI in the door, it will continue to get wider and wider until it gets into where it shouldn't. And that's part of the problem with the policy. We need to allow enough that we're not inhibiting people, especially with disabilities and so on, but at the same time not risking the license. Werner?
Yeah, it would be useful to screen submissions with AI, for example, to see if a human is worth looking at, or we can just throw it away and ignore it.
Right, and so
Things like that might be useful to allow.
Mhm.
I think an absolute approach is not useful. Also, 5 years from now, we will be in an entirely different AI world than we are today.
Mhm.
A lot of the ethical concerns about the internet being stolen to train the AIs that we have today might no longer be the case, or might be stronger. So it's difficult to know how to do this for plan for the long term.
yeah. So Werner's point is we don't want to completely shut out AI because there are places where it can be useful where it's not contentious. For example, having it do pre-commit screening where it's not generating code, it's just looking at it and deciding if a human needs to look at it or if it already found things that it should be sent back to the submitter to fix before someone from the project spends time on it. And I think that's a good use case for AI. Since it's not actually generating any code, it's just reviewing it and providing feedback. And his point that planning too far into the future is difficult because we don't know in 5 years whether the kind of legal concerns will have been resolved or will just be worse. And so, this policy is likely to continue to evolve, but we do want to have something in place now. And I think to Werner's point, in 5 years, what a developer looks like might be different to the point where it's possible that in the future it will be difficult to find developers who aren't kind of dependent on AI. And we don't want to limit ourselves there, but at the same time, the core part of FreeBSD is the license, and that can't be put at risk. And so that's why we'll have to have a pretty hard policy for now, and then adapt over time. Christos has a follow-up?
Yeah, so you said that we cannot predict the future, that in 5 years maybe AI is so widespread that we cannot avoid it, essentially. But my point was, what if we, how can I say, that, well, we cannot predict the future, and if everyone is using AI, that does not necessarily mean that we should also use AI.
Correct.
Like we could stick to our own proven way of decades-long quality code instead of trying new approaches that might end up backfiring at some point.
Yeah, so Christos's comment.
Conservative approach.
Yeah, comment was that we don't need to necessarily just do things because other people are doing them, and I agree. That's why our policy for now is a relatively hard no with a few carve-outs, rather than trying to leave it more open to interpretation. And then over time, if the technology becomes proven and the ethical and legal concerns get resolved, then we can adapt. But for now, while things are in the air, it is definitely, we can't risk that right now. That AI is too ambiguous, especially on the licensing and ethical side, to allow that to get into our repo, especially since it is now even more difficult than in the past to try to take something out of the repo after the fact. Any other questions or comments?
I have a question for you. So please raise your hand if you are already using the AI-assisted tool in your development, actually. Okay, and please keep raising your hands if it is very useful and you want to continue to use that. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yeah, we are discussing the policy, and it is not a black and white problem, and we are not going to say just no, and it is important for us to understand what the risk is and how to deal with it. So yeah, let's discuss this policy and continuously, and we have to update based on the current status and the legal changes in the world, as Allan stated.
Yep, and just another point of clarification is that we are allowing the AI tools to be added to the ports tree, since having the tools is kind of unrelated to the policy about what code can be committed to FreeBSD. And we want to make sure that users have access to useful tools. But yeah, still any actual code or documentation or anything that gets written, when you commit it, you are signing off that you have the authority to actually license that code under the license you're contributing under. And if it's AI generated, you can't actually say that. So please don't commit things you don't have the copyright on to the port or to the source or ports tree or doc tree. So onto the topic of the foundation. We've been working on improving communications and the relationship and alignment between the project and the foundation. Much more frequent meetings between the core team and the foundation, and talking about what they're doing and pressing them to improve transparency and have more involvement from the project on what projects and so on at the foundation actually get funded and developed. You had a question?
Yeah, sorry to backtrack a little bit, and this may be out of the scope of the AI policy, but I think AI can be used...
Wait, hold on, we have a mic now, so you can actually ask your question that way.
This may be a little bit out of the scope of the AI policy itself, but I think what AI is most useful for, and I use it for in my work, I never actually use it to write code, but looking through large code bases. I think we should encourage new users that want to contribute to specific parts of FreeBSD to maybe ask AI where they can contribute, where they can find specific parts of the code to make their changes and test them out. Because when I'm just diving into a massive code base and I don't know anything about it, like
or where to find
I recently
things
did this in OpenSSL, I just asked AI and it pointed me right to where I needed to look. So it's very helpful in that regard.
Yeah, and I think that gets back to Warner's point about being able to use the tools to do things like see a large incoming submission and see if it makes sense for a person to look at that, or if there's obvious enough problems that we should send it back to the submitter. And so I think that kind of tooling that isn't generating anything that is going to involve a copyright, yes, I think that's a good use of AI. All right. Can you pass the mic to Christos behind you?
Okay, so am I heard?
On the stream, yes.
Okay. So my answer to this would be that yes, it can be useful, of course, but maybe taking the time to dive through a code base and
to the guy in the back corner.
Sorry?
That guy.
Sorry, I was meaning to say that while it may be useful, of course, if you have the answer right away, you save time. But I was thinking that maybe it's a good thing to spend some time and try to navigate through the code base, find out how to read code more efficiently, how to build the skills needed to be a better programmer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, there's some value to that, and
Not
you
having
know,
the answer-
also the project
yeah.
can improve the documentation about where to find the code, so you're not just looking at the giant code base, but actually,
Yeah.
you know, knowing where to look. But I don't think that we need to ban the use of. Yeah, there's no way to enforce banning the use
Yeah,
of AI for
exactly.
not a submission anyway. But like, I don't think there's a point in making it harder to be a FreeBSD developer.
So my point initially, when I said we should have an absolute approach, wasn't to, well, of course,
Right.
you cannot forbid someone from using AI in their computer. That's obvious. I meant that we should send a message that this is not kind of welcome approach, that we want people who know their stuff and will spend the time to figure out their stuff instead of saying, yeah, I don't know. I don't have a
Yeah,
clear
I don't
answer
know that
this,
we want
but
to be
I think
overly
it's a slippery slope indeed.
puritanical about who's a real developer. But
No, not real. Like
Yeah.
more that you spend the time to dig through something instead of wanting the answer.
so in the back.
Hey,
Oh, I can't read.
No, I got him a microphone
Oh,
already.
okay.
still getting used to it. Do you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, working. Okay, I probably will be a little bit in minority here. Just a couple of counterpoints on all this stuff. To me, it seems a little bit overinflated. I think right now people are just scared about those technologies and don't know how it works and how to use it. But I've been using it for 3 years, like for most development tasks, and it helps a lot, not only writing code, but like debugging code, and I can give you tons of examples where I was working on some strange part of the stack, and I just don't understand. You dump it to the to the AI, and it gets you around pretty quickly. But anyway, I think would be interesting to see a little bit of opposite direction in terms of how a project is going to embrace AI, because it's definitely going to stay, and we should think about how we can maybe use it. Yes, for I discussed for benefit, because at some point we could even like. I would imagine we would be able to load the whole source tree into some kind of model and do useful stuff with it, and who knows what else. Anyway.
Right, and so I think using it for tools, like Warner's
So
example
just-
of pre-submit testing,
And I
your
think
example
in,
of debugging.
just on my kind of last point, I think in 5 years it's probably we'll see it like as extended text editor.
Yeah, I just think
But anyway.
right now there's legal ambiguity about the copyrightability of it, and if you don't own the copyright to something, you can't contribute it to FreeBSD. That is our policy, and that will not change. Maybe the question about the copyrightability of AI-generated code will change in the future, but the project's policy is you can't contribute things you don't own or control the copyright to, because otherwise we're not the FreeBSD project. We're just a project with a jumble of code that you can't license. Go ahead, John.
So I have a question from Dave, who I guess didn't ask this question before, like DCH Dave. So what do you say?
He wrote most of this, so I don't know what his
I
question
know,
is.
I'm just the messenger.
Yep.
Oh, I guess he has a question for the room, but you may also want to comment on this. Can you put your hands up if you would be okay with a large language model trained solely on our commit tree and history? And then I guess the question for you perhaps is that something you're thinking about?
I don't know that it's something we've really considered. I think to do that properly, we'd have to have almost everyone who's committed something have their agreement to do that. Like, you know, even if it's most of us, if enough of us object, it seems like it wouldn't be ethical to submit other, although at this point, because of the scraping of the internet that Warner mentioned, I think all of our code base has already been subsumed by all the existing LLMs. Although having one that was trained on only our stuff, and you know, we know that nothing in it contains GPL copyrighted code or something, might make something useful. But I think a big part of that is going to be getting a very majority consensus from the people who have contributed in order to, agree to that on the ethical grounds. And I think that poses a whole set of challenges, even back to the opening thing there, where not everyone's around to give their consent anymore.
Maybe I'll reply a bit on that. I agree on ethical questions. I think the BSD license as written probably does permit.
Yeah.
But so there's perhaps room for some gray. But yes.
Yeah, I guess the point of the BSD license is that anybody can take this and do what they want with it as long as they respect those two rules. So. Colin has something.
If we were going to do this, we would need to not just take everything that's in the FreeBSD tree, because over time there has been a lot of GPL code in the tree. You would need to be careful about filtering out and only getting the BSD licensed parts of the BSD tree.
Yeah, like there's likely we want to possibly exclude even the CDDL license bits if we're going to generate an element, or maybe we have two, one with everything and one with only the BSD license stuff or something. But I think a big part of the point of this would be something that we could be sure everything it generated was BSD licensed, and so yeah, we'd have to curate the input to never have anything that wasn't already BSD licensed as input. And that could be difficult even on especially dual license stuff. Like, if we give it the Intel graphics drivers that are BSD licensed but also GPL licensed, does that pose a whole different set of complexities and so on? Emmerich.
Honestly, I really doubt it would be even possible to train an LLM that would be of any use on the FreeBSD code base.
Because it's just not a large enough.
Yeah, it's very small, and even existing LLMs who have consumed FreeBSD and many other projects are kind of useless at very specific work. So yeah, either way, whichever the ethical answer is, I don't think it's possible to do that.
Yeah. Any more questions before we move on to? No? Okay. Back to working with the foundation. We've had a lot more meetings than in the past with the foundation, including both in-person and online meetings, working to understand how things work from their side, especially as those have evolved over the last few years with their bigger staff and so on, and identifying areas of conflict or confusion between the community and the foundation. Part of that spurred by the Baptiste's previous developer survey and just in general. And that's why you're seeing more and more transparency from the foundation on how funding is allocated and so on. And then using our additions to the survey the foundation did, where we added a bunch of questions based on Baptiste's previous survey, so that we can continue to monitor that over time and see that we are improving the community's understanding and perception of the foundation, and that you're continuing to create that openness and transparency so people understand what the foundation is doing and how decisions are made, and continuing to improve that process so that the project and the community have more input into the foundation's decisions. But this is all still ongoing and lots of work. Anybody have any questions or comments on that? So the key inputs of what goes into the core team's planning and into the foundation planning and priorities are obviously the individual user and community surveys that we do together with the foundation, direct feedback to the foundation that they receive from people who donate and just users in general, input that the core team gets from user meetings and discussions and other groups, as well as obviously the foundation has their board reviews and their annual budget, and core is working on a technical roadmap to lay out what the project and the foundation's priorities going forward could be, and then obviously talking to everyone at conferences. So if you have ideas that should go into this technical roadmap or questions or whatever, please do talk to both the core team and the foundation about that. So yes, on to Warner's favorite topic here, the bylaw review. The last election ran into an interesting issue where, well, an unfortunate issue in this case, especially with the timing of, the core election being just after, or closing just after BSD and, our 9th member sadly isn't here. And that posed a whole set of problems, and maybe the bylaws can be updated a little bit to deal with that type of situation, or just provide more clarity on what can be done and when things happen. But the other thing that's been a continuing problem for core is just the handover. In general, the outgoing core team is outgoing, and they have a meeting with the incoming core team, and they hand over a list of tasks, and then the outgoing core team is gone now. And they are not usually that interested in following up and so on. And so there's usually a pretty big reset with a new core team. And that often means that some things that were in flight don't get carried over as well as we would like. And so that's why we think some kind of more gradual replacement, a kind of a little bit more ship of Theseus kind of idea of if we're only replacing some of the members of core each term, that we'll get more carry through and so on. But working out the specifics of that, including, when people depart the core team early, are we replacing 4 people if we need to replace 3 and so on, or does one person stay on longer in order to replace other people? And it's a whole other set of things where we need to come up with rules that are going to make sense in situations we can't necessarily predict, and so on. And that there's clarity to the community and figuring out also just the transition. If we're moving from electing everybody every 2 years to having this kind of rolling thing, how do we actually start that and get switched over to that mechanism? Because there's a bunch of different ways it could be done, and we want to make sure it is done in the best possible way. The other thing there is just in general, the turnout for the elections has been not great. It tends to track similar to general elections in Canada, and that number is shockingly low. Like less than 2/3 of people generally are casting a vote, and we have a voting period of over a month. So I don't think anybody has the excuse that they didn't have time or didn't know it was coming. So I would also be interested in knowing from people who didn't vote why that was. One second. And then the last part is we also got some feedback from the election officer, the person who ran the election for us this last time, about some of the issues they faced and how we might improve that process.
I'll make this quick. 3 points. One, all the complicated rules and stuff you're talking about handover is why I think we should basically completely replace.
Mm-hmm.
Also, we've had criticism about our membership of core only representing developers. We need to fix that.
Yep.
I could go at length about maybe ways to do that. And then third, the current bylaws are poorly suited for Git, because
Yes.
What is a commit according to the bylaws? Is it having an author line? Is it having a committed line? You could make debates in a number of ways, so we need to make things a little clearer about that. So
yeah, and maybe decide what,
yeah.
that there's less of a hard line between a contributor and a committer now, and maybe it wouldn't be bad to have more people be able to vote for core. And
Right,
that might
so-
solve the problem of the developer focus.
Right, so those are things that need to be carefully considered, and why I was excited earlier in the conversation about wanting to ask questions about this. So this could be an entire discussion on its own, but I don't think we need to have it here and now.
Not right now, but we do want to.
We need to have
that.
it.
Yes.
But not in this room right this minute, although
Yep.
a few extra comments would be bad if people had them, but.
Yes, definitely would
I
like
just wanted to
input.
add a little bit of color to some of the problems that, you know, are listed here. Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions or comments about changing the FreeBSD core team bylaws?
I'll throw one out.
Okay. You were the last person to try to do this, right?
It's okay. It's all right. The tire marks on the back of myself from the bus are mostly cleared up. One thing that both Warner and I have discussed is that the initial bylaws, we kind of by fiat made up a rule for how we would adopt them. Kind of like adopting a constitution in a country. You just make up what the standard is for adopting the new one. And so rather than trying to reinterpret the current way of amending, you could just have a new one from scratch with its own made up standard for adopting it. And that's how you could amend the standard for how you amend it. And that might be the most
Easier
straightforward way to get
way
there.
to go, yeah. So why didn't you do that last time? Because you thought it was going to work, right? Okay.
You don't want the IDARs, believe me.
Okay.
This idea postdates John's efforts.
Ah, okay. But yes, I think that is probably the much more straightforward way to go. Any other questions? Is anyone actually awake? Okay.
Actually, I have one thought,
Yes?
but I'll look for a question. Oh, were you going to ask it? Oh, okay. On the roadmap, one suggestion is that, or perhaps clarification, I believe that the consumer of the roadmap is not just the foundation,
For sure.
but the community at large, because in many cases, especially volunteer folks, would like to know what's useful to work on when they don't necessarily have a task picked out, but they have some hours to spend. And so I think one way in which it is useful is it is quite useful for the foundation to know what the priorities are, because that is actually one of our key inputs for making decisions. But it is also quite useful for other folks, whether it's corporate interests who want to know how to spend some kind of donate in, you know, in kind resources, or for volunteers to know how to spend time. So a roadmap is not, on the slide it just said foundation. I just kind of wanted to clarify it's actually targeted at a very broad audience.
Yeah, and I think it's also handy there, specifically to that point, to have a roadmap that contains more things than just what the foundation can do, and that it's clear which ones maybe are already being worked on and by who, so that people can join those efforts or focus on the places that are not staffed already. But we're very much looking for more input on what people would like to see on a roadmap. You know, maybe we can start with, you know, kind of extending out the have, need, want session a bit to like looking further forward, where would we want to get to? Kind of, you know, the want session usually is a bit more of nice to have kind of thing. And like if we're looking forward, where do we need, but we know it's going to be a while, and how do we break that down into smaller pieces that we can actually start achieving to get there?
Another thing to consider for roadmap purposes are have, need, want in particular tends to focus on technical topics.
Yep.
But a nice goal might be something like, we would like to have 10 new committers in 2 years. So it would be good to be open to all sorts of different types of things that could be in the roadmap, not
goals that
things that
aren't
are strictly things that show up merely in the form of a patch.
Yeah.
But things that affect the community in other ways.
Yeah. Or yeah, like we've seen with Kirk's chart of like, you know, can we pull the average age down a little bit?
Wow, now that's it all.
That's
You're getting very ambitious
Yeah,
there. You have to have
exactly.
goals you can actually meet, but yes.
Right.
Although I like that one. That's a good stretch goal.
Yes.
Hey, I'm working on it. We're getting to the point that mine are getting old enough.
Any other questions or thoughts? Oh, no.
So it's not really a question, but
Wait, the stream would like to hear it, so.
Okay.
it's not really a question, but I'm a person in my 20s, and looking at the history, it seems like we have a steady stream of people in their 20s that come here. It's really nice that there's lots of older folks for people to learn from when everybody's in their 20s. If you look around at projects like that, it's like super duper toxic. Thanks.
Yeah, like I think to kind of John's point, on a roadmap, we also might want to look at where our source of new young people can be from. In the past, a big chunk of that was from derivative projects like TrueNAS and pfSense and OpenSense and so on. And with some of those going away now, are we losing a channel of people that would have become FreeBSD users and committers? And what can we do to make up for that? Or how can we find other channels to continue to bring more people in on also, especially the kind of sysadmin DevOps side, not just the developer side? Because, I know there's a whole generation of people that got into FreeBSD when they worked at dial-up ISPs out of high school and college, and that doesn't exist anymore. And then there was the next thing and the next thing, but what is going to be that next thing that's going to be the next set of FreeBSD developers and users and administrators?
Yeah, I just want to plug the GitHub pull requests.
Yes.
If you want to help with that, see me. I think that's a good
It
conduit
is
for
very
some
good.
potential new people. We've gotten 3 or 4 that way, and other stuff I'll talk during Source Manager. So.
But yes, thank you very much for spearheading that and for everyone involved in making the GitHub pull request stuff happen, because I think that is a very big channel for incoming people. We have to that point, we have to go to where the people are in order to attract these new people. We don't quite have the same name recognition anymore where we can expect people to come to us based solely on the name recognition. Joseph, or Benedict, then Joseph.
Right. Is there some kind of strategy regarding different communication channels like Discord, Matrix, Slack, Messenger of your choice? Like, I see a lot of splittering of individual groups into different communication channels that don't necessarily overlap into others. I know there's a need for some communication to be private, but I see a lot of people that are new to the project don't know like where to go. Is it Telegram? Is it Signal? Is it Matrix? Is it whatever?
Yeah,
do you have something in mind to solve that?
Yes and no. Part of it is, back to my previous point, we have to go to where the people already are. And so, even if we don't like Discord, if there are 6,000 people there, then we probably need to be there, even if we don't want to be. But at the same time, yes, having a little more focus instead of some people are on IRC, Slack, Matrix, Discord, the forums, etc. Although we also tend to see sometimes a generational divide there. There are a certain group of people who only like the mailing lists, and then a different age of people are on forums, and a different age of people are on Discord. And I don't think you're going to get any of those people to move. But yeah, and there's a whole different question about, when does a certain, communication channel or community space become official, right? The Discord got FreeBSD in the name, but it's not run by the FreeBSD project. There are volunteers that run it, and what's the right level of, are they kind of quasi-official, or is it official? If they're official, do certain people, like who takes over administration? And it gets all kinds of complicated. And so, yeah, it's definitely things that we're looking at how to do that in the best possible way. And at especially to take advantage of the people who are currently volunteering to do that, and not wanting to alienate them out of wanting to do that or anything to that degree. Joseph, go ahead.
So, correct me if I'm wrong here, but Christos, Jake, Americ, Matheus were all introduced to the project through GSOC. So
I think so, yep.
Oh, and Boyan? You too, Boyan too. So it seems like that's a pretty good vehicle for getting new young people. And I know I mentioned this a lot, but it's a constant battle to get people like Warner. And there's lots of other people here too. But I just, Warner's done a whole lot, so it's just, and he's right in front of me. We need people to mentor. That's and to come up with new projects.
Yeah,
so
I think both of those things. Obviously mentors are huge, but also projects that have the right kind of scope and scale for a GSOC project. Not necessarily because we want every GSOC project to be immediately successful and committed to the tree, but that it needs to set the student up for enough success that they will want to continue working on it. And yeah, those can be hard to come by, but I think we do need to spend more time trying to enumerate more of those projects and then match them up with people to mentor them and make them happen.
yeah, so our success rate, I don't want to define it or describe it as a success rate, but probably, I think we talked about this last night, something like under 25%, 15% maybe of the projects actually get committed to the tree. But the main goal is just to attract new people. And
Right,
so,
but I think in particular, do we know what percentage of people that do a GSOC end up getting a commit bit? Because I think it's much higher than 15%, although it's not 100%, obviously. But I think that might be the more useful yardstick for that particular.
Well, I do think it is useful to define what do you mean by success. And I
Yeah.
wouldn't say patch merge to tree during the GSOC period is success. That
No,
would be a pretty
that's-
poor metric. So I
yeah.
do think it's important to make sure the language isn't implying that. Like my student that I have this year, I told him at the very beginning that the best outcome is that he becomes a committer.
Exactly.
If the code works, that's great. Or if the code takes time to land later, or if it comes in pieces, whatever. Like it's how far you get. It's not really, and even if the student does well and learns and gains useful experience that makes them valuable to employer in the future, and they don't become a committer, that is success. Because that's actually Google's metric, in
Metric,
fact. And so if we have a good relationship, we have a student doesn't fail, that's success. And I think we should maybe use a metric more along
Yeah.
those
or even
lines
just-
than we got
Does the person continue to be involved in FreeBSD after Google's not paying them?
Yeah, I mean, I guess to emphasize that point, I mean, if you consider corporate internships, your success metric is not that you hire them when they graduate.
Right.
You know, you would like some of that, but it is not. Anybody who thinks they're going to get 80% conversion on that is an idiot, or else they're really paying really well and the Coke is great. It's fine. It's actually, I mean, GSOC is a terrible internship, I will say. Like, it's not well structured. There's not organization. There's not like a place to go or anything like that. So we should expect, in a sense, worse conversion than, say, a corporate internship. So pretty low numbers, I think, are quite acceptable, even if it's a bit frustrating.
Yeah, so Emmerich?
Yeah.
He's already got a mic.
Do we know how many people are purely introduced to FreeBSD through GSOC, or people who would anyway have gone into FreeBSD and just happen to do GSOC? Because speaking
Well,
for
since
myself,
we have a whole row of them there, of the GSOC people, how many of you had heard of FreeBSD before getting involved in GSOC? So it looks like maybe 2/3 of them had heard of FreeBSD before?
well, heard of and wanting to go into it is different. I mean, for my part, I was interested in going into FreeBSD anyway, and GSOC gave me a way to do it, so it probably accelerated it. But I think either way, I would have.
Right.
And so I wonder how many GSOC students are actually introduced to FreeBSD through this, versus GSOC students who are already interested, like alternative operating systems or whatever. And
It seems,
given
based on
enough
who's in
time.
the room, about 1/3 of them didn't know about FreeBSD before GSOC.
Right. That's cool.
The foundation asks that in the survey, that they make you answer, like, posted on the forum and. I think the foundation gives you a survey as a GSOC student with a number of questions about yourself, and I think one of them is like, how did you find out about FreeBSD or something similar like that? You could maybe take that answer.
There might be
and
data.
get an
we can get.
actual statistic.
Yeah, that would be useful data there.
So, losing things. It's actually, we do an interview typically with the students, and that's where we ask those questions. But putting it in a survey format is not a terrible idea. So, thank you.
So do you write the answers down, and would you be able to get a metric of how many people in GSOC had heard of FreeBSD before?
For the interviews we did.
Okay. I think another point that we could do there as a project is enabling the students at the start of the project better. I know an idea we've had before is like if we had a VM image that already had, you know, a Git checkout set up and a GUI and an editor, so that students that were maybe not as familiar with FreeBSD could fire up that VM, and then it has the Samba sharing to their regular computer desktop, so they can use whatever code editor IDE they're already used to, write the code, and then just go into the VM to do the build world and so on. I think that might help them get started a lot more easily, and might lead to some of the early failures being mitigated.
So I also want to add a few things about GSOC. So first, Joe's going to go in a little more detail tomorrow during his talk, I believe. He's been keeping more stats because we've been involved with GSOC since the beginning. We've been accepted every single year, which is really big for our project. And because there's a lot of open source projects that do apply every year, and it's growing. And but I wanted to share something too. Joe had mentioned about always looking for mentors, and so I want to highlight someone here who's here, Amrik. And so I met Amrik. I think it was a couple of FOSDEMs ago, and he had talked about how he really wanted to get involved with FreeBSD, and he was interested in GSOC. And then he was a student that following summer, which was really exciting to see. And now he's a contributor. He's been doing some contract work for us. But I think the coolest thing about his story is the fact that he's a mentor this year. So it was like, it wasn't last summer, it was the summer before that, yeah. And so I'm sharing that because for the young people, you may not feel like you're qualified or you have the experience to do this, and you are. And because Madhi, who's not here, he's another person who contributes to the project. He was also a GSOC student, and at one of the FOSDEMs, we used to have a developer summit there, and so he had this idea he wanted to share during the meeting. And I said, well, why don't you mentor this? And he said, I can't do this. I'm way too young and new and inexperienced. And I said, co-mentor, you can do it. It's your idea. And he did. And so he worked with someone else who had a little more experience doing this. So this mentor mentored a new mentor. And then he also became, I think, at 1 or 2 years, worked with Joe. Since Joe runs the program basically for the project, and he helped administrate it too, and so he got involved that way. So it is a great avenue for us to get new people introduced to the project. Thank you.
Yep.
Probably last question.
Going once, twice? Well, Andrew has something. Or he just wants his mic back.
So from the YouTube chat,
Okay.
The question is, will FreeBSD continue to support the PowerPC CPU architecture?
That's a source manager question.
We'll talk about that this afternoon. But I think we're ready actually for our first break. So we'll take a break for about 30 minutes and be back here at 11 a.m. local time.